Hey, all right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mike Dufilly. This month's presentation, I'm taking a little bit of a change in direction temporarily. Ordinarily, we'd have these set up for talk specifically about contact center. Been actually fielding a lot of questions recently about kind of Kari's Law and Baums Act and kind of what they are and what they mean, what people have to do to get prepared to comply with these. Just wanted to put together a presentation so we could get this out to everyone and have some information out there that everyone could benefit from. So we will definitely be resuming normal contact center presentations here in a couple more months here when that cycle comes up. But for this month, we wanted to take a little bit of a detour and talk about emergency notification kind of generally, but specifically Kari's Law and Baums Act here. But thank you definitely for joining. And I promise, even if you're here for some contact center content, I think this will be useful and interesting to you. So just a quick disclaimer here first. Obviously, I am not a lawyer. I'm not specifically offering legal advice here. Obviously, we're going to be talking about some laws, so we do have to say that. And obviously, consult your own organization's risk management team and counsel for specific advice for organization. I'll try to interpret this for you guys as best I can, but anytime we're talking about new legal stuff, until the lawyers really get a hold of this, it's really all up in the air. So I just want to get that out there first. So to get started, just want to talk a little bit about what is Kari's Law specifically. So what Kari's Law was a new federal regulation, federal law that was passed in 2018. And its requirements actually already took effect for any newly installed or manufactured systems starting in February of last year, February of 2020. And you may or may not have heard a little bit about this at the time. This one was something that a lot of manufacturers already complied with. It was really a matter of just kind of checking the right boxes in a system. What Kari's Law is a requirement for all multi-line telephone systems, so PBXs, to support two features. First feature is the ability to dial 911 without needing a trunk access code. So basically, you wouldn't need to dial 8911 or 9911, just to be able to pick up any phone on a system and dial 911 and have that reach the PSAP, the 911 dispatchers. The second feature is that the system needs to provide notification to a central location or another person or organization, regardless of their location, that a 911 call has occurred that contains a valid callback number for the location, basically the extension that they called from, and any more granular information if that information is already being provided to the PSAP. And I'll explain what that means here in a second. The kind of important thing to note is for Kari's Law, the Mitel and ShoreTel system before it has essentially always been fully compliant. We've always supported the ability to dial 911 without needing a trunk access code. We've actually always had a built-in email notification feature for 911 calls that I'll show you guys here right now. I'll talk real quickly and actually show you guys on our system about where some of these settings are. The big one for 911 is actually here in Director on the sites page. On the sites page, we actually have a field here towards the bottom for a site, a particular location on the system, where we can define a list of emergency numbers. On a North American system, 911 is going to be pre-populated for you. Depending on what country a site is built in, it's going to automatically pre-populate the emergency numbers generally for that location. We do have the ability to add more here. There are some kind of edge cases where we may need to do that. But any number that's in this list is going to be treated specially by the system. It's not going to be affected by call permissions, things like that. That basically anyone's allowed to dial it. And then you'll notice here there's a checkbox here to the right that says trunk access code required. You definitely don't want to check that because that will actually make you not compliant with Kari's Law. Again, there are some edge cases where we may need to require a trunk access code. There are systems where they don't want 911 calls to go to dispatch right away. We have a customer who's like that. So, the ability is there, but for the purposes of Kari's Law, you always want to make sure that this trunk access code required is unchecked for your emergency number for 911. Now, as well as adding the number there so it can be dialed without a trunk access code, we can support just a simple email notification that a 911 call has occurred on the system. And the way we actually do this is with a feature called event filters. It's actually a diagnostic feature. We basically have the ability to generate an email for any sort of alert that comes in on the system. Mostly we use it for things like you might have a trunk down or a piece of equipment that's gone out of service. But the system also generates an alert anytime a 911 call is dialed from any phone on the system. It's logged to the Windows application event log on the system's HQ server, the primary server. Its event ID here is 1319. And whenever anyone dials 911, it'll generate this 1319 alert. And it'll let you know that, hey, someone made an emergency services call on port, and then the port's actually going to be, their phone's MAC address, give you the user and their extension. So for most systems, that's enough to identify where that call was made from. For most small businesses, just a simple email to somebody saying, hey, a 911 call was made, here's where it was from, is sufficient to kind of meet the requirements there in Kari's Law. Oh, and Brittany's letting me know we have a question here. I can seem to barely see. Hey, there we go. Where's the event filter in Director? Excellent question. I was just about to show you. In Director, under the Diagnostics section, so it's this on the toolbar on the left, the maintenance here, it's the second to last little heartbeat icon. And then you'll see event filters there in the main toolbar on the left. And this is where we can set up those alerts. They're very easy to create. You just hit new here in the upper right-hand corner. You can choose a source server for a 911 call. I'd always leave that set to all. I'd always leave connect services set to any. And instead, what we're going to filter on here is this event ID field. And that's going to be 1319. You would specify that for the event ID. Again, you can leave the type set to all there, and then just specify an email address you'd like that event to be delivered to. And then you'll get the email notification for that. So I promised everyone some free stuff when we sent out the notification for this. It has to do with another law that was kind of passed alongside Kari's Law, which is Baums Act, and how it affects some of the notifications. If you had an environment where a simple email notification saying, hey, what extension did this come from, isn't going to be sufficient to identify the location. So let's say you're on a campus, perhaps, or where you have multiple buildings, or you're at an address where there's a building with multiple floors. Just knowing the extension might not be enough information to help you identify where a 911 call is actually being made. And because of that limitation with just that email notification, Mitel decided to make the 5-user version of the emergency notification bolt-on application essentially available for free, $0 license cost. And what that application can do is actually provide a combination of not only email notification, it'll do that, but also voice notification. It can actually place an outbound call to notify someone that something's occurred. And also a pop-up notification. There's a client application that can be installed on a user's PC that goes along with this. It'll actually provide a pop-up alert notification on their computer when an event is triggered. And the nice thing is, 911 calls are one class of event that can be triggered with this, but there are other events that can be programmed into this application. So we call it our code red, code blue, code yellow app. You can essentially define profiles for different sorts of scenarios and alert on them with this app. The alerts are always triggered with a phone call, so either a phone call to an emergency services number or some other extension. And of course, I'll say this is the 5-user version. Basically, that means it can only notify up to 5 people. There is also a 50-user version that this can be upgraded to. It has 2 sizes, 5 and 50. 50 is as large as it goes. if you have needs to go over those numbers, or if you just want something that's a little bit of a better product, we do have what's called now Mitel Revolution available. This is a replacement for what a company called Synapse manufactures this product. Some of you might have heard of their SA Announce product. It's a pretty popular notification platform. Basically, Revolution is what they're calling the upgrade to that, and they've entered into a partnership agreement with Mitel to actually brand this as Mitel Revolution and integrate it into the system pretty deeply. And it's a lot neater. Obviously, you can do voice, email, you can do text messages, SMS notification. There's an app for Androids and iPhones. We can even do automated weather alerts, things like that. Very popular in school systems. So if you do have some sort of advanced emergency notification needs or notification needs in general, definitely want to check out the Revolution product. You know, probably deserves a whole presentation on its own to talk about its capabilities. So I did want to show you guys a little bit of what this looks like. While I'm getting that ready, you know, obviously, if you're interested in getting this and you want to take a swing at installing it yourselves, we're happy to just provide the licensing and application for you. Just shoot us an email at help@verteks.com. Let us know that you're interested in getting this 5-user version, and we will go ahead and get the licensing and application for you to install yourselves. And of course, if you'd like some assistance from us with the installation, you know, obviously just be a little nominal charge for our time and labor to help you get it set up. But, you know, we're happy to provide it for you either way. How to get this set up. Now, I'll show you guys what the actual application looks like on the server here in a second, but a little bit of work we generally do ahead of this. So this app is unique in that it can provide a little more granular location information to someone who's receiving that notification. And the way that it does that is through the jack number field in Director. You might have noticed this when you're looking at a user in Director, when you're looking at their phone assignment, there's this jack number field, and it's blank generally. What this is basically a sort of description field that's associated with the phone hardware itself, not actually with the user. And this is an important distinction you'll see, that lets us, for the purposes of the emergency notification app, define the location of the phone. Well, we can basically describe it using text. So this is a screenshot from my own extension. You know, I'm the middle cubicle in the service area. I can actually put that here in the jack field, middle cubicle in service area. That's my location. So if I were to call 911 from my phone, looking at that emergency alert, it's actually going to say middle cubicle in service area. And when emergency services arrive on site, you know, the person who received that notification can help direct them to the right place. Again, this lives with the phone and not the user. So this is important when we're talking about 911 calls, because we do have the ability for users to reassign their extension to different phones. So, you know, I may be sitting at the phone at my desk one day, but, you know, right now I'm sitting in a different desk in my office, and I've moved my extension onto a different phone. So now I'm not in the middle cubicle and service area anymore. I'm back in our demo office. But again, this is tied to the phone, the MAC address of this phone, not to the user. So now that I've reassigned my extension, now I'm going to be using the jack number that's associated with the different phone I'm on. And we'll actually show you that in a second. I'll do a demonstration. And again, just to show you guys where that is here, looking at Director here under Users and Users, our most popular screen here, right on the General tab for the user. If you scroll down and look at their primary phone port here, just under that, you'll see a spot where it says their current port, so the hardware they're currently on, and the jack number. When you're editing this, you'll just want to make sure that where it says primary phone port up here actually matches what it says for their current port. Again, this jack number field is tied to for the purposes of editing it in Director, the primary phone port here. So just as an example to show you me, like I said, I've reassigned my phone. So you'll notice my primary phone port ends in 52E8. My current port is actually 51FD. So you'll notice that it still says middle cubicle in service area. That's tied to this phone, the primary phone port for the user. 51FD is actually Brian's phone. So 51FD, and you'll notice that jack number says demo room. Now you'll notice here in a second, in fact, I'll just go ahead and do this. I'm going to go ahead and call trigger an emergency alert, just so I can show you what that looks like. So this is the pop-up notification I got from the client. That's how I have it currently configured. And you'll notice that it correctly identified my extension, my name, and it has my location as demo room. So it's correctly handled the fact that I've reassigned my extension to a different device, and it's displaying that jack number field location here as the caller location. This is how we can handle users moving around, is with that jack number field being tied to a phone and not a user. So again, we just saw the emergency notification test here. One other thing you can pull up is this log viewer. And this is for the client. Ordinarily, when this is running on a user's PC, it's minimized. It'll actually go live down in the system tray by the clock. You don't have to see it all the time, but it does contain a convenient log letting you know kind of all the actions that are taking place on the system every time an alert is triggered. There are some other useful features here in the client. I'm just going to click on settings up here so you can see them. The first one here is we do have a username field. These don't have to be defined on the server, but this is just something to let other people on the system, other users of this client, know who's actually looking at these. So you can type in anything you'd like here. And in this case, I just put MD Philly. The other important field here, the user profile, this is something that has to be defined on the server. And I'll show you guys the settings here in a second. But this is basically defines a combination of settings for what kind of alerts I want to get. And that's defined on the server. So you could have a user profile, for instance, that only alerts for 911 calls. So if you wanted to get notifications from the client for only 911 calls, you would type the name of that profile here. In my case, I just have a single profile set up for testing. So we'll just use that one here. Of course, we have to define the IP address of the server. And then a few options here. This is a particularly useful one, the show pop-up from tray when users log in or log out. With that selected, basically what will happen is on my own client here, whenever any other person signs in or out of their PC or fires up this client, I'll get a notification letting me know that they're either watching or not watching these. So I can know if there's other people logged into the system and watching these alerts, so maybe I can get up and step away. Just a way to keep everyone tuned into everyone else's availability. Main window, close tray reminder. It'll let you know if you hit the X up here that it's just getting minimized. And then of course, a nice checkbox here to start this client automatically when you log into Windows. Definitely handy if your job is to be watching these and make sure it's always running. Also underneath here, we do have the ability to play an audio alert. This is just a single alert that occurs when any alert is triggered. So if I'm basically subscribed in my profile to more than one kind of alert, more than just a 911 call, it's still going to play this single audio file for any alert. In fact, the one that they provide here included with the client actually just says, this is a 911 emergency alert. So you can continue to use the built-in canned alert, or you can provide your own alert file. to use with this, or you can disable them completely. So from that test alert that I generated here, you can see at 10:18 a.m., these last two lines in the log. Again, we can see my number, my name, my location, that's that Jack number field demo room. And then you can see the fact that I saw and acknowledged this alert. So you'll know who saw it, who acknowledged it. And again, all this is logged both in the client and back on the server for audit purposes. On the server side of things, just to talk a little bit about how this is set up. So if you do want to set it up yourself, you can do that successfully. When it is installed, basically it's going to provide you on your desktop with two icons, one for the emergency notification configuration and one for the log viewer. The log viewer is essentially kind of what we were just looking at for the client, so we don't need to cover that again. But the configuration here is definitely important. There is some setup that's needed to make this work out of the box. It's not just something you can install and start working automatically. This is what it looks like. It does install two services on the server when you install it, a watchdog service and the actual emergency notification service. The watchdog's job is just to make sure that this is always running. If there's ever any sort of problem with the application, the watchdog is going to notice and restart the service to help make sure that this is always running. When it is configured, all these boxes are going to be blank except for events. And here in events, there's going to be one that's called emergency call. This is a built-in event and can't be deleted, really. And this is for your 911 calls. Now, to set up the system to monitor these calls, there's one thing we have to do for any alert, and that is this route point needs to be created. Even for a 911 call, where we know the number that's being dialed is always 911, we need to provide a route point extension for this application to use, so it can, for the purposes of like a code blue alert, it's the extension you dial to trigger it, but it's also used for outbound calls. If you have this set up to make outbound voice alert calls, it's going to use this route point to make those calls outbound. Again, those are easy to set up in Director. You would just go to route points here. We would create a new one. I'll show you the one we have set up for ours here. It's the one I'm sitting on right here, 911 notification server. Again, that's that extension 1421. I do recommend go ahead and checking off the make extension private when you create these. This will just make sure that this doesn't appear in any of the directories or anything on anyone's phone. No one really needs to know about these. They're essentially plumbing. The call stack depth, you'll want to make sure this is set to 5 if you're on the 5 user version. I would set this to 50 if you have the 50 user version, just so that the system can handle the maximum number of notification calls as needed through this route point if you're going to use it for those voice alerts. The user group that's assigned to it needs to have permissions for your trunks outbound so it can make the notification calls. And the server here needs to be set to the server that this application is installed on. This would need to be installed on, usually we recommend your headquarters server, but it can be installed on a DVS server if needed. And the server there just needs to be set to the server where this app is installed. And just on the routing side, you can leave this routing either set to no answer or busy, or actually should really be set to never here. So with that route point defined and associated here with this event on the server, we'll be able to make those outbound voice calls for the purposes of this emergency number here. You'll notice here, again, this one's a little bit different because this is our event 0. This is the pre-built one that monitors 911. The emergency numbers field here will start off blank. I do recommend putting in both 911 and 911 here, the application, monitors the system for all calls, but the way that the emergency calls work on the Mitel system specifically, even if we have the system programmed so that you don't need the 9 in front of the 911, someone can still dial 911, and the system will place that as a 911 call. So definitely a little bit of safety there. So we want to make sure that those are defined. Underneath, we can provide a color and a message for the client screen pop associated with these. Here in the middle column, contact call details. This contact call IVR, this can be a text-to-speech message that's placed outbound to someone who's receiving a voice alert call. This is a little bit of a unique application that does support text-to-speech. A lot of our apps kind of don't do that. This is one that does. So I can actually type any sort of message here that the server will actually read out. You'll notice I have these tags here. These will actually are variables. They'll fill in the correct piece of information for the type of call here. So this event name tag, for instance, is going to be emergency call. Extension is going to be whatever extension initiated that 911 call. So you can use these tags as variables to fill in the correct information. And then an acknowledgement message. So again, we can verify that all these messages have actually been received and acknowledged. For internal calls, we can even display a message on the phone display. Again, a little bit of a unique capability of this app. We can do this with Revolution as well. Email contact information, similar to the voice text-to-speech here, but again, this is just going to appear in text in an email. And then this last section here at the end is an additional piece of integration with another application we have called the Enhanced Paging bolt-on application. Again, a little bit out of scope here, but I'd say if you're at the point where you might be considering needing some enhanced paging as well as this, we probably just want to look at Revolution for you in that case, because the cost of both of these would, if you need to go over 5, which you would if you were using the enhanced page, you'd be probably be cheaper to look at Revolution at that point. All right, so these are some of the settings we can look at here for an alert. Just to show you, this is the one I've defined separately, this 1868. It's the one I dialed to trigger that test alert. Again, you'll notice this looks a little bit different than that event 0, mostly in that here, where before I had a section where we could define emergency numbers to monitor. For this one, this event is always only going to be triggered when this number is dialed, when the route point is dialed, 1868. And then here in this section underneath, we have what they call the inbound call IVR settings. Basically, we have an option. So we can say, when someone dials this route point, we can actually say, hey, you're about to trigger an emergency alert. Thank you for calling. And then we can hang up on them or transfer them to another destination. Again, for the purposes of this test, I have set to no IVR. So all I have to do is dial 1868. It's going to hang up on me right away and generate that emergency notification pop-up. Beyond that, the rest of the settings here are the same. The rest of the configuration here defines my different contacts. So for phone contacts here, that's going to be, I have to assign a name to this contact, a number. This can be an internal extension. It can also be an external number, like a cell phone or home phone. You would just want to define that with the trunk access code. So if I wanted to dial, an outside number, I'd just do 955512334 here, and then that's going to dial that number for me. And then underneath here, we can see I have an ability to filter out different events here. So if I, for instance, only wanted to get the 911 calls, I could filter for that. or if I wanted to get both types of alerts here. Basically, is the ability to pick and choose what things you want to get alerted on. User profiles, again, this is used with that client application. So there's that user profile field we have to define here in the client. I'll bring back up again. User profile. So this is the important thing here for the client, and that's defined on the server right here. And again, it's just a name. So for instance, if I wanted to be like 911 only, I could name it that and then just check off emergency call here only. And now that profile 911 only is set up, and I can go back here to my client, specify 911 only. Oh, I haven't saved it yet, so it's going to yell at me. There we are, connected. All right, now we're using profile 911 only. And you'll notice you will get an alert here from the client if there is something wrong with the profile you selected. So if you're seeing that, just double check the settings on the server and make sure they're correct here. Again, email contacts, similar idea. I can specify an email address and choose which alerts to alert on. And of course, just make sure you hit apply or save and exit there. And basically, once all that's defined, once you've set up your at least 911 events or any additional alerts, and those can be pretty much anything. You might have, code blue might be a weather alert. Code red might be, a missing child. All sorts of different things you may want to alert on depending on your business and organization. You can define all those here. Again, the important thing as far as the licensing goes with this is the number of users. So the 5-user version is free. And what that means here is that basically I can choose up to 5 contacts and 5 user profiles and 5 email contacts to be alerted when a profile is triggered. And it's just going to go with the first 5. So, with the 5-user version, I do have the ability to configure more than 5 contacts here. But what's going to happen is, if I configured 6, it's going to alert the first 5 I created, and the 6, even if I have it checked off, it's just going to be ignored. So just keep that in mind if you do set that up. And that can be, a combination of all these things: 5 voice phones and 5 user profiles for clients and 5 emails. But that's it. We can't do more than 5 of any of those modalities. And there's a larger version of this, a 50-user version, but it does cap out at 50. So if we need to go over 50, then we would be looking at Revolution in that case. All right, so moving on, I want to talk about Baums Act a little bit here as well. This is a law that was passed at the same time as Kari's Law. And this one's requirements are a little bit different. So the focus of Baums Act was to get better information to the 911 dispatchers about location. And this is the one that people are sweating a little bit more. What this does is it defines what they call a dispatchable location. This is the, dispatchable location, a little vague. What they say in the statute is it's, the validated civic address and whatever additional information is necessary to adequately identify the location of the calling party. And again, this is really more for, addresses where there's a campus, multiple buildings, or potentially locations where you have buildings on multiple floors. The address on its own isn't going to be enough to identify the location of the person who might have called 911. So, they're going to want some additional information. And in the comments in the Federal Register about this, they kept using the phrase, the right door to kick down. So that's kind of their thinking, is that what information do we need to find the right door to kick down? They set up 2 different compliance dates for this, because there's kind of some some technological work that needs to happen to really make this law work. So January 6, 2021, all systems manufactured after that date need to provide the ability to provide dispatchable location information for fixed devices. So those are things that don't move around, a physical hard phone that's plugged into the wall that doesn't move. Devices where their location is going to be static. The ability to provide, more granular information for those devices. The harder one, the one that people are sweating, is January 6th of next year. This is where the law requires manufacturers to provide this information for non-fixed devices. And really, we're talking about with a non-fixed device is like a Wi-Fi phone or a soft phone, a device that can really be moved anywhere on your system to a different building. Maybe it's, like I said, somebody's laptop, a cell phone, a laptop. You carry that around and use it anywhere. Now, really want to get what's really giving people heartburn. Imagine you have a cell phone on a laptop over a VPN at like a Starbucks or something. How in the world are we going to provide the actual location of that user to 911? They're calling out of your phone system, but they're at a Starbucks somewhere. So how do you do that? And that's really where some work's going to have to be done. So how we comply with the fixed location requirement. We do this now. This is really kind of how 911 currently works, or E911 works. It's basically a cooperation between our phone system and your carrier. So when 911 is dialed from a location, the way this works now is we're going to send out a special caller ID for that 911 call. We call it the CSID, C-E-S-I-D, in director. You'll see that defined. We usually define that based on the IP address of the phone, although we can set it for a site or something like that. Just to show you again where that is in director. Usually where we like to define it is here under the wrench section, under configuration. Under telephones, we have something called the IP phone address map. And this lets us specify in the system ranges of IP addresses that phones could be on. And we can define the CSID for those ranges. And that's really the primary purpose of this phone address map kind of nowadays for us. So for instance, let's say if you have a building or a campus with multiple buildings, you're probably going to have different VLANs, different IP addresses in each of those buildings where phones can be. And we can actually define those ranges here in the system and specify different CESIDs, different numbers we'll send out to the carrier when someone dials 911 from those locations. This is how we can provide that more granular information now. In addition to seeing the CSID here, to show you a couple other places you might see that, we can define it at the site level. So under system and then sites, we can define a site CSID here, as well as, this is a little bit old school, but on the pieces of equipment. So any switch where phones can be registered, any switch that can support registration of phones, we can define a CSID there. Generally speaking, we always want to do it at the IP phone address map just because this is the one that can override the others. So this is considered the highest priority location for CSID. Then it would go to the equipment, and then it would go to the site. So that's kind of the hierarchy. Phone address map, phone switch, phone site. With that CSID defined, what happens then is then we pass this off to the carrier. So basically, we're just sending a phone number, one of your DIDs, to the carrier. That is going to correspond to an entry that they have in their what they call ALI database, automatic location identification. So this is a lot of times, so Intrado is the company that provides a lot of these services. I know AT&T specifically partners with them. You might hear Intrado come up as the Intrado database as sort of slang for this ALI database. This is going to be, that number is then going to correspond to an entry for the address and additional information in that database. So you can actually say to your carrier, I want, to define this CSID number, for this floor of a building or this particular room in a building. You can go that granular. It kind of depends on how many DIDs you have. If you want to get very granular, you may need to order more DIDs even. But they can build out this database with your cooperation that says, this number is this address and this additional information. And then that information is what gets provided to the 911 dispatchers when they see these calls come into the system. So we currently comply with the fixed location requirements of the Act. This is sort of how it's, in cooperation with your carrier to really provide that additional information as necessary. And again, I hesitate to say, well, how granular do I have to be? Well, it doesn't really say. It just has to be enough information to adequately describe the location of the person calling. That's going to mean different things for different locations. So definitely you'll want to put your heads together with your organization's leadership to figure out what that means for you. So a little bit about this non-fixed location. So really, it's not currently possible with any existing technology for pretty much any PBX currently. Actually, they say specifically in the register, this law is really designed to spur the location or development of technology so that this can start to happen. So that if you have a cell phone at a Starbucks and you dial 911, it will actually correctly identify your location. And really, this is coming from cell phones. Currently, technology exists in cell phones specifically. If you dial 911 for your cell phone, they can ping your phone and get your GPS location. Well, we don't have anything similar for corporate phones, corporate cell phones, things like that. We don't currently know exactly how we're going to be compliant. I can tell you just based on kind of the current internal calls, they basically have all of Mitel's engineering for the MyVoice Connect system is currently focused on this because it is a upcoming legal requirement. They are working diligently to add what's going to be needed to comply to the phone system with the law to this. And really what that's looking like it's going to come down to is a new protocol. It's actually one that's existed for a little while, but it's called HELD. Stands for HTTP Enabled Location Delivery. And the idea with that is going to be that, somebody like the Starbucks, for instance, is going to have built into their Wi-Fi a mechanism so that a device can ping that access point and get back the actual physical location address of where the device is connected. So for like a Wi-Fi access point, that's going to be the physical location of that access point. But they are talking about adding support for this into, like network switches. So a phone plugged into a network switch somewhere would be able to kind of ping that switch or a server connected to it and say, I'm on this port, what is my address? And get that address back. And then again, currently we don't have a way to deliver this kind of out of band to the 911 dispatchers. There is no kind of direct mechanism for that. Again, that's something that's going to have to be, added by the manufacturers to these systems to do it. So really, for non-fixed devices, Baums Act, not really something that anyone does currently, but everyone is working to add this capability into their systems so that we can comply with this non-fixed location. It's probably going to be something that's, everyone's going to have to figure out. I think it's going to be, one of these situations where we have, Mitel might do it one way, Cisco might have, another way. Eventually there's going to be a winner that settles out of this, but currently it's all really still up in the air. All right, so let's get to a few of our questions here. Yep, so yeah, Robert saying this might result in huge privacy implications. People often use it to obscure the location. Yes, and that is why it's actually been such a problem for 911 dispatchers. Yeah, the way the law is currently written, really didn't make any exceptions for privacy. They said currently everyone's developing this under the assumption that, you know, for a system to really be compliant with this law and not have the FCC come down on you, you're going to have the ability to provide a user's real location to them if they make a 911 call through your system. So yeah, it's like I said, it's given everyone a lot of heartburn exactly what this means and how we're going to comply. So again, still mostly up in the air. I did want to come back to Michelle's question. You know, she's asking, you know, other number is set up for pickup for the hospital. Can that number be set up as well? Okay, a non-emergency number. Yes, absolutely. So you can, in the emergency notification app here, you can absolutely, for that event 0, for this emergency call, define other numbers here as emergency numbers that you want to be alerted on, even if they aren't actually emergency numbers. The only thing I'll say about that is that if you do define other numbers here that you want to monitor if they get dialed, you know, we can't create another type of alert for that. So it is going to show up as if it's a emergency call, a 911 call. But you can monitor for the dialing of more numbers than just 911. But for the purpose of the alert, it's always going to say emergency call. All right. We definitely have a little bit of time here for any additional questions, if anyone has any. I think that is pretty much it for me. I'll just jump here to my takeaway slide here. So again, just to kind of recap for everyone, you know, we are fully compliant now with Kari's Law for kind of all scenarios, but for kind of simple notifications for single site, single location, but also we have the ability to provide more granular information to you if you do have a campus or multi-story structure that you might need that additional information for. We are currently fully compliant for Baums Act for fixed devices, you know, and then, you know, still waiting to see exactly how everything's going to pan out for non-fixed devices. You know, just to speak to kind of Robert's question about the privacy implications there, I could absolutely see compliance with this, or the potential pain of complying with this, spurring some organizations to say no soft phones. That may be a way that some organizations deal with this, you know, when the time comes. You know, again, we'll just have to really see how it all plays out. And yes, we'll absolutely send a copy of the slide deck out to everyone. I will get that to Brittany so she can send that to everyone. And of course, we are recording this. We'll have the recording up a little bit later. So again, you'll be able to see this on our YouTube, our Verteks Consulting YouTube channel. But definitely wanted to thank everyone for coming out today. Documentation, Julie asked if we have any documentation for Kari's Law and Baums Act. I will include, we do have sort of a bulletin from Mitel I'll include with this and share with you. It's actually a sort of a living document from them. They're publishing revisions to it kind of as they develop some of these technologies in the system or get some clarity on some things. I will provide you everything we've got. There are a lot of great resources kind of out there on the internet for this. I'll tell you the one that's kind of most useful for me was there's a pretty large PDF document that essentially it's all the comments in the Federal Register and kind of commentary from the FCC about their thinking when they were putting these laws together and kind of what their intentions were, which I think is going to be kind of important, you know, when people are trying to figure out what this actually means for them. And you can get that on the fcc.gov site. I'll see if I can provide my direct link to it to you, and I'll have that included with the slides and everything else as well to everyone. All right, well, yeah, if we don't have any more questions, I want to thank everyone for joining this morning. Hopefully it was informative. Like I said, we'll get back on our normal sort of contact center stuff here in the next few months. And definitely feel free to reach out to us if you're interested in taking advantage of the free license from the emergency notification. Again, happy to just provide that to you as is for your team to configure or set up. And then if you need any assistance setting up, we're happy to help with that as well. It's a pretty neat little application. It can do some interesting things for you, even if using it to monitor for 911 calls isn't maybe your primary reason for wanting it. Like I said, they just made the 5-user version free for everyone. So it's there for you if you'd like to take advantage of it. Well, everyone have a great rest of your week and month here, and we will talk to you next time. Have a great day. Bye-bye.